Hello everyone, I have here one of the more interesting games from round 2 of the Isle of Man International Chess Tournament. This game is played between German Grandmaster Dennis Wagner and Levon Aronian, who really needs no further introduction. A while back I remember seeing an interview from the Sinquefield Cup where Nakamura described Aronian as being like a tricky leprechaun, and this game certainly illustrates that. In this game, Wagner with the white pieces and Aronian with black. Let's see how the game goes. Wagner opens with e4 and Aronian plays g6, so a little bit offbeat. d4 from white, taking more space in the center. Bishop g7, knight c3 and c6, so Aronian is preparing to strike with d5. We have f4 from white, gaining more space in the center. d5 from Aronian. And white pushes forward with e5. Knight to h6, so this knight can always spin over to f5. Knight f3, bishop g4, h3. So this bishop has to drop back or capture the knight, so Aronian takes the knight. We have queen takes f3, knight comes to f5, and knight to e2, defending this pawn on d4. And also at some point this knight on e2 makes room for c3. Aronian goes e6. We have g4, knight to e7, knight to g3. So white makes room for the light square bishop to develop, and also the knight on g3 maybe supports f5 in the future. And here Aronian breaks with f6. We have e takes f6, bishop takes f6, c3, defending the pawn on d4. And bishop to h4 from Aronian, pinning the knight, also making way for a rook to come to f8 to pressure this pawn on f4. Bishop d2 from Wagner, so he is preparing to castle queenside. Queen d6, white castles, knight d7, bishop d3, and black castles as well. Knight to e2 from Wagner. We have rook h to f8, so this puts more pressure here. Queen to e3, and bishop f6 from Aronian, so Aronian is afraid of the bishop getting trapped with g5, that's why he played bishop to f6. And here rook h to e1, putting more pressure on e6, and if white can get in knight to g1, then he would be doing well. So Aronian harasses the rook with bishop to h4, rook to f1, bishop f6, knight to g1. So this knight is going to reroute to f3, which controls this nice e5 square. And in this position, the pawn on e6 is a little bit weak. So black has to be careful about that. So here c5 from Aronian. So if he waits any longer, then white is simply going to play one of the rooks to e1, so now Aronian breaks with c5, knight to f3, knight to c6, we have king to b1, king b8, and h4 from Wagner. So white is definitely a bit better here because of his space advantage. Also, he has the two bishops. Aronian captures the pawn on d4, we have c takes d4, knight to b6, and rook to c1, putting the rook on an open file. Queen e7. Aronian is trying to step out of this bishop b5 pin, but unfortunately he is a little bit late for that because after bishop b5, this knight doesn't have any squares to go to. Rook c8, and now Wagner manages to open up black's king, as the knight doesn't have anywhere to go to. So after bishop takes c6, b takes c6, well, here white should play b3, and he has quite a pleasant position, with this pawn on e6 being a weakness, and also black has holes on c5 and e5. This should be quite good for white. But instead here Wagner plays knight to e5. So this controls c4, but after that is taken, if f takes e5, then knight c4 is a bit unpleasant for white. So here white goes queen takes e5, king to a8, and queen back to e1, so not wanting to fall for knight to c4. So here queen to f6, hitting this pawn, and bishop b4, attacking the rook. Rook f7, queen to f2. This holds on to d4. Now Aronian brings the knight in, and now b3 from white, but Aronian manages to get in rook to b8, and somehow this knight stays here on c4. Bishop c5. So here, if this were to be taken, then black would just take the bishop. So bishop c5 and rook to b5 from Aronian. White is actually doing fine here, but Aronian makes things incredibly tricky. The threat is to take on c5. For example, if h5, then rook takes, and if white takes the rook, then knight a3 is mate. So here Wagner plays king to c2, just stepping out of this pin, but Aronian goes rook takes c5 anyway. After d takes c5, knight a3 check, and here king to d1 from Wagner. The computer actually recommends king to d2, which is not a move most humans would play. But the point is that the king now controls this c3 square, preventing the knight from entering via b5 and c3. So if black goes queen b2 check, then simply king to d3, and all the key squares are covered by white. So this is actually fine. White is even better. But here king to d1, knight b5, so eyeing the c3 square. And here queen to e3, so now the queen controls these squares, but unfortunately h4 is not guarded anymore. So here again king to d2 was recommended by the computer, but it looks very awkward. But anyway, queen e3, and here e5 from Aronian, taking advantage of the fact that this rook is undefended. So here f5 from Wagner, Aronian takes the pawn, king to c2 from white. So Wagner is trying to find shelter on the queen side. Aronian plays g takes f5, we have g takes f5, queen to f6, defending this pawn, king b1, and e4, just opening up the long diagonal for the queen. And black is also threatening knight a3, which would be checkmate. So Wagner plays a4, making a flight square for his king, knight to d4, so watch out for any knight takes b3 tricks, followed by rook to b7. So here Wagner goes rook to g1, threatening to go rook to g8. So Aronian stops that. Rook f8, queen c3, and here e3 from Aronian, creating total madness on the board. So if that is taken, then black can go knight takes b3, followed by rook to b8, pinning and winning the queen. So here black is simply threatening to take this pawn with check, and then go queen to e4, which would hold everything together. So white defends that with rook c to f1, queen to e5, keeping defense of this knight and also supporting the pawn on e3. King a2. And here h5 seems very strong, just simply pushing this passed pawn down the board. But Aronian chooses queen to e4, so forcing this queen to keep tabs on the c2 square. White goes to rook to g7 and rook to b8. Aronian now tries to trick his opponent with this plan of a mating attack down the b file. White is actually slightly better after this move, but over the board, this looks incredibly dangerous. Wagner goes rook after g1, and knight takes b3 from Aronian. So here white would be better after rook 7 to g4, which chases the queen off the 4th rank, preventing queen takes a4. And after queen takes f5, white goes rook to g8, pinning this rook, threatening queen takes b3, And if knight d2, then white gets a mating attack. Here the rook enters the position, and well, black will soon get mated. But all this of course is very difficult to see over the board. So after knight takes b3, black is threatening to go queen takes a4. So Wagner defends this, but now this loses. Here d4 from Aronian. So this queen has to keep watch of the d3 square. So queen to c4. And knight to a4 from Aronian. So attacking this queen, and it was in this position that Dennis Wagner resigned the game. If queen e2 for example, then simply d3, kicking this queen again. And if queen g4, then simply queen to e5, threatening mate on b2 with no good defense for white. So this win puts Aronian on 2 out of 2. There are currently 19 players with 2 points, but it is still very early on in the tournament, so anything can still happen. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe, share and leave a like. Until then, see you in the next video.